Okay. Well, hello, hello. Welcome back to the next lesson in SEDA College Online's Intermediate Lesson Series. I'm very happy that you could join me today for the next lesson. I think I have a very good topic today. I'm going to talk about something that is essential to writing in English. So, I know many times people say they want to practice writing. And they say, I want writing practice. I want to do more writing. And then the focus is always on grammar and vocabulary. And of course, yes, those are important for writing, always. But what I'm going to talk about today is something that I think is even more important. We're going to talk about sentence structure. So, grammar and vocabulary are just two parts of many different things you need to know to write. And it's not always easy to transfer. You may be an incredible writer in your language, but then you write in English and it just doesn't translate. It's not the same. And this is because writing is unnatural. It's not a natural skill. Humans have to practice, humans have to learn to write. We must learn letters, we must learn all of the different scripts and punctuation and all of these rules. So, writing takes time. And I think it's always important to start with the very basics, the very fundamental parts, and then continuing from there. So, what I'm going to look at is one of the ways writing is very different from speaking, and then we're going to talk about this and how to use it. So, I hope you're ready because we're going to begin. So, what is this essential thing? Well, we're going to talk about sentence structures. So, we're going to talk about how do you actually build a good English sentence when you're writing. And I'm not just talking about grammar here. I'm talking about the actual structure of the sentence. So I won't talk about grammar at all in this lesson. No grammar, no vocabulary. We're talking about writing a good structure. What is the correct way to do it? How do you punctuate it? And how do you put them all together? So we're really focusing on clauses again today. I know you go, oh God, more clauses. Well, uh, for those who have been watching my lessons every day, you'll know I've talked about clauses, I think, 3 times before. We talked about them with conditional sentences, and we've talked about them with relative clauses, and we talked about them with certain future sentences. And so now we're putting all of that idea together. What do these clauses do? Well, they're really here to build complex sentences. And so we're going to look at how you really use them correctly in English. And then we're going to talk about something I think many people skip, many people don't care about, and that's punctuation, specifically with commas. English has some specific rules about when you can and when you cannot use a comma. And so I'm going to talk about that as well because clauses and commas go together exactly. They are best friends. So let's begin. What are the English sentence structures? Oh, sorry, what are clauses? We need to begin with the basics. So, clauses, I'm going to talk about it again just in case anyone is new and has not seen this before, or just in case you've forgotten. It's been some time, so it's good to refresh your memory. So, a clause is one of the basic parts of a sentence. So, for example, you can take a word like elephant and you can make it into smaller parts. The first level are syllables, so I can take the whole word elephant and find 3 syllables inside. Elephant. Well, I can also take those syllables, and break them into smaller parts, letters. Elephant. So words are one unit that has smaller units inside of them. And that's exactly what sentences are too. Sentences have the exact same structure. So, for example, I like cake. That is a complete English sentence, subject, verb, object. Well, this one sentence is also one clause, one complete clause. And so it is one sentence and one part, but you can have more than one part. I like cake and I like ice cream. Well, this is one sentence as well, but now it's more than one clause. So I like I like ice cream is one clause and I like cake is one clause. So here we have two clauses making one sentence, just like we have three syllables making one word. So all parts of language can do this. You can always find smaller parts within, and that's where you find the rules, how these small parts work together. So this is how English sentences make. They're all about clauses, and all the ways to put them together, all the correct ways to do it are based on these clauses. This is one of the most fundamental ideas for English writing. Well, there are two types of clauses. You may remember already if you may remember from the previous video. So if you know already, very good. We have the two types: independent, which are complete, and totally finished. An independent clause is something like I like cake. It's one sentence, it's complete, it's one clause, it's independent. I do not need anything else. And then there's the opposite, a dependent clause. This one is the exact opposite, as I said. um, they are incomplete. So a dependent clause is not finished. I need something more. I cannot say it without some help, some extra part. So let's look at that sentence from before. I like cake and I like ice cream. I like ice cream is an independent clause. It's one clause, totally finished. Just like I like cake, it is a totally independent clause. And I can say them separated. I like ice cream, I like cake, and they're perfectly okay. Or I can put them together and I can say them as one sentence together. I like cake and I like ice cream, and that's okay. So let's look at a different example. After I finish dinner, I'll clean the dishes. Well, here we have two clauses again. After I finish dinner is now a dependent clause. It's not finished. After I finish dinner, what? What will happen after? What are you going to do? What will I do? You must have something else here. It doesn't feel correct. It's not a finished idea. And so that's how I know it's independent or it's dependent. It's incomplete. Whereas the other part, I'll clean the dishes, that's our independent clause. Gosh, I'm trying to keep them straight. That's our independent clause. And it is finished because it's a totally finished idea. I'll clean the dishes. Okay, cool. All the information, totally complete. And so you can also begin to see these commas appearing here and there when we start getting these clauses together. And I'll talk about those rules, don't worry. What's so important to know is that a clause can be a sentence, and a sentence always has clauses, but not all clauses are sentences. It's similar to if you know geometry and you have the idea that uh, all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. It's the same thing. All sentences have clauses, but not all clauses are sentences. And all clauses will have a subject and a verb. So I finish, I'll clean, I like. They'll always have a subject and a verb. Dependent or independent, they'll have a subject and a verb. What makes them different is if they have some conjunction, some extra word here that makes it incomplete. After, before, while, when, since. Some extra word that adds an extra idea. That's really what makes the difference between a dependent and an independent clause. So what are the sentences and how do I use these clauses to make sentences? Well, the first sentence type is just a simple sentence. This is the most basic sentence in English. It is a totally complete idea. A simple sentence is totally finished, no extra information, it's done. And it contains a subject and a verb. So it also contains one clause. That's a simple sentence. It has one independent clause. So every independent clause can be one simple sentence. That's how they work. An independent clause makes one simple sentence. That's the basic creation, the basic unit here. All other sentences are made by some combination of a simple sentence and other parts. So this is the central unit here in writing, the simple sentence. So when you want to write and you want to make more complex sentences, always think about your simple sentence. What is my core sentence here? So for example, I walk. That's the minimum, a subject and a verb, complete, I walk. But of course, that's a strange sentence, not a lot of information. How about Sarah works at a cafe? There we go. That's our totally finished, complete sentence. Or David will exercise tomorrow morning, even longer. But this clause is totally finished, totally independent, no more information, nothing more to need, and there's no smaller parts. I cannot find more clauses inside. There's only one subject and one verb. That's it. And that's how you know that's the base unit. Always look for your subject and verb. If you cannot find more, you've got your simple sentence. Also, let's say we have a simple sentence and I want to add two simple sentences together. Well, there we come to the compound sentence. This type of sentence is two independent clauses connected together. So two simple sentences joined together. It's actually two totally complete ideas, and they can be connected with something called a conjunction, a special kind of conjunction. Very common ones are and, or, but, so. There are a few more. So there's things like yet, nor, for, but the common ones are and, or, but, and so. Those are kind of the four most common. And these are used in the middle, and you connect the two independent clauses with this conjunction. So, I like cake and I like ice cream. That's my example from before. And this is actually an example of a compound sentence. I have two complete ideas. I like cake. I like ice cream. And I've connected it with a comma and a conjunction, and. Remember, you always need a comma for a compound sentence. It's essential. You will always have one. And a compound sentence must have two subjects and two verbs. They always will because you have two complete independent clauses, so they must have two together. How about this? Sarah loves TV, but she doesn't like movies. So here again we have a negative but, and the way that the ideas join together depends on the conjunction. So and is for the same, but is for opposites, or is for choice, so is logic. Um, so the types of sentences you connect depend on the conjunction, but the structure is the same. One clause, subject, verb, subject, verb. And so the compound sentence is kind of the next easy one. You just take two simple sentences, whack them together with a conjunction, and you're done. So what's next? Well, now we come to the complex sentence. It's more complex. The complex sentence is actually has a little more structures to it. So the complex sentence is now where we see the dependent clause. So the simple, the compound are all independent clauses. No dependent clauses allowed. No. Now we come to the dependent clause and the independent clause. And when we mix those together, we get a complex sentence. And so it is actually a combination of one totally complete idea and then one incomplete idea, one unfinished idea. And this is where we have another comma rule. The clauses are separated by a comma if the dependent one comes first. So, some examples. After I ate dinner, I'll clean the dishes. That's my example from before. So here I have two clauses. After I eat dinner, I will clean the dishes. So we have our dependent clause, after I eat dinner. I know this is dependent, one, because after, two, because it's not finished. As I said before, what? After I eat dinner. What? I need the other part. And so I have my independent clause here, I will clean the dishes. Additionally, we can say them in the reverse order. So we should clean the car before we go on the road trip. So if anyone's unfamiliar, a road trip is a very long travel with a car. They're very popular in the United States, very big countries. You know, you get in a car, you drive for hours and hours for fun, just to drive, just to experience the car. That's a common vacation in the United States. So we have our dependent clause here. We should clean the car. And now I feel that's a finished idea. That's totally finished. And then, well, what next? Before we go on the road trip. And now there's no comma because the dependent clause, before we go on the road trip, comes next. If you notice, you can actually find another independent clause here. We go on the road trip. Um, that's actually an independent clause. It's a strange sentence, but if we take it out, we have a finished sentence. But as soon as you add before or after or while or since one of those words, boom, you make it a dependent clause because it has that idea of what next. Before I go on the road trip, what? Well, we should clean the car. So that's how a complex sentence works. You're mixing this dependent idea with an independent, complete idea. Well, there's one more to talk about, and that's the compound complex sentence. So now we're mixing it all together. We take the simple and we make the compound, and then we take the compound and we make the complex. So we're putting it all together. So the compound complex sentence is one complex sentence with another sentence added with a conjunction. So basically, you take a compound sentence, but one part on either side is now a complex sentence. So you can think about it either as a complex sentence compounded or as a compound sentence with an additional a complex sentence with an additional sentence, another simple, another complex. So really this type of sentence can have up to 4 clauses inside of it. This is kind of the biggest sentence we can make in English. And the exact same comma and conjunction rules are all still used. They're all still here. So, for example, and they're very big. After I eat dinner, I'll wash the dishes and I'll clean the bathroom. One sentence. This is one complete sentence, but now I have 3 clauses. After I eat dinner, I'll wash the dishes, I'll clean the bathroom. And we've got those 3 different sentences. So we have a compound sentence here. I'll wash the dishes and I'll clean the bathroom. There's one compound sentence, independent clause, independent clause. But then to the compound sentence, this first sentence here, or sorry, I can then take, this is a compound sentence, I can separate them and I have an independent clause, simple sentence, independent clause, simple sentence. Well, to this simple sentence, I'll wash the dishes, I can add a dependent clause after I eat dinner. And so now I've got a complex sentence here. After I eat dinner, I'll wash the dishes, and then I add another independent clause, I'll clean the bathroom. So we've got 3. How about a 4? Before I go to work, I brush my teeth, and I always put on perfume after I get dressed. So there we have kind of the biggest type of sentence you can make in English. We have the complex sentence, before I go to work, I brush my teeth. And there, it's a totally complete complex sentence. Dependent clause, before I go to work. Independent clause, I brush my teeth. But then I make the conjunction and I put another complex sentence. I always put on perfume after I get dressed. And then we have an additional complex sentence with after I get dressed, and I always put on perfume. And so now we've taken the two complex sentences, put them together with the conjunction and for compound sentences and made a compound complex sentence. So these are the four sentence types in English. These are really as big as sentences can get. So what are now all the punctuation rules for this? So let's look at commas and when to use them. So this is really important when you're writing certain documents like essays and stories and letters and emails. The rules for commas in these essays are all based on the clauses, totally. Um, in the past, the comma, it represented a breath, a pause in the sentence. And when you write poetry, the rules are much different. For poetry, the rules are very, very different. You can use commas very differently. But when you write something more structured, like an essay or a letter to your friend, the rules are strict and they're very there, and they exist based on these clauses. So it's not so much about breathing anymore as just the rules to separate the clauses correctly. So the rule I said before, a compound sentence has to have a comma before the conjunction. So always comma and, comma or, comma but. So if you put two independent sentences together, simple sentences, with a conjunction, you must have a comma before, always. Next, complex sentences must have a comma if the dependent clause is first. So, in my other examples, I said after I finish dinner, I'll clean the dishes. Because the dependent clause was first, we had a comma. After I finish dinner, comma. If I reverse it, I'll clean the dishes after I finish dinner. Now, no comma. That's fine. We only use the comma if the dependent clause is before the independent clause, so it comes first. And these are the two base rules. These are the two foundation rules, because compound complex sentences are a combination of these two, and we use the same comma rules inside the compound complex sentence. Additionally, though, if you remember, we talked about relative clauses. And so relative clauses are a different type of clause from the ones we're talking about, and they have commas if they're unnecessary. So if you remember, if the relative clause can be removed, you put a comma on either side. So that's another area you'll see commas in sentences. And if you have a list of three or more, so I like cats, dogs, and foxes. So then we have comma, I like cats, comma, dogs, comma, and foxes. So there we have the commas to separate the list. So these are kind of four basic rules for commas. There are more situations where commas are needed, but these are the most fundamental rules. If you remember and you really learn these four rules, you will usually have all of the comma situations correct in your writing. So I wrote a small letter, a small little essay I'm going to read to you, and we can look at how commas are used in this essay. This letter. Dear friend, I hope you're doing well. I'm writing to ask you a favor, and I hope you can help me. Before I go on holiday, I need to find someone to watch my cats, who are Fluffy, Scruffy, and Bob. I think you would be great for this, since you own two cats yourself, and I hope you have the free time next week to watch my cats. Best wishes, Austin. So this is my little letter. And within this letter, there are situations where a comma is required. And as you can see, I've marked those in blue. So the first sentence, I hope you're doing well. Simple sentence. Subject, verb, totally finished, complete. So I can finish it with an exclamation. This is called an exclamation mark. The next sentence, I am writing to ask you a favor, and I hope you can help me. So I've put these two together. I have two independent clauses. I'm writing to ask you a favor, simple sentence, independent clause, and I hope you can help me. So I see here, uh-oh, and I hope you can help me is another independent simple sentence. So I must put a comma before and here to make this correct. Next, before I go on holiday, I need to find someone to watch my cats, who are Fluffy, Scruffy, and Bob. So this is one long sentence. This is a complex sentence. Because I see I have two, or actually three, but two specific clauses. Before I go on holiday, I need to find someone to watch my cats. So I know this sentence, that's the complete idea. Before I go on holiday, I need someone to watch my cats. And I see I have two verbs. I go and I need. So now I need to figure out the comma. Well, this one's dependent. Before I go on holiday. What? So I put the comma here because I know the independent clause comes next. I need to find someone to watch my cats. That's a complete sentence. So there I know the comma's here. Now, what is this? Who are Fluffy, Scruffy, and Bob? If you remember relative clauses, that's one of those. So who, where, um, that, which, those are your relative clauses. And this one is unnecessary because I can remove it. I need someone to watch my cats. Complete sentence. But I want to say who the cats are, so I give their names, Fluffy, Scruffy, and Bob. Um, and so I separate this with a comma too because this is unnecessary. It's another clause, another relative clause, totally unnecessary, so I followed this rule. Next sentence. I think you would be great for this since you own two cats yourself. And I hope you have the free time next week to watch my cats. So I have the final sentence here. This is another compound complex sentence because now we've got two things. I think you would be great for this since you own two cats yourself. There, okay. I feel it. That's a finished, complete sentence. Well, why is there not a comma? Well, I have a dependent clause. Since you own two cats yourself, that's dependent, but it's second. It follows the independent clause. I think you would be great for this. So I don't need a comma here. This one's okay. But here I add another sentence. I hope you have the free time next week to watch my cats. That's actually one simple sentence. Simple sentences can be quite long. I hope you have the free time next week to watch my cats. And I have connected it to the complex sentence, I think you would be great for this since you own two cats yourself. So now I need a comma before the conjunction to make this complete. Additionally, there are comma rules for letters, here and here. But as you can see, all of these rules come together to make the punctuation in this complete. If you do not have commas in this situation, these sentences are technically incorrect. They are not finished because English requires commas in these situations. And no commas. If you put a comma here, this is incorrect. So if you're wondering about commas and how to use them in sentences, I recommend learning these four-word rules for your writing. These sentence types all work together to help make punctuation. So if you learn the four sentence types, and then you can write your essay, and then identify what sentences did I use, what types did I use, and you can add your commas at the end and kind of fix your punctuation to help increase your writing. This is something very important if you're thinking about taking the IELTS in the future or the TOEFL or a different type of English exam. They look for writing. So I really recommend learning these types of sentences, how they fit together, and then learning these punctuation rules so that you can really, really improve your writing and really take it to the next level. Okay, that's everything for today. I know this is a very conceptual concept theory lesson, but that's writing. Writing is concepts. So, what did we talk about today? It was sentence clauses. We talked about independent and dependent types and relative clauses. And then we talked about the four types of sentences those clauses can make: simple, compound, complex, compound, complex. And those were kind of it. It doesn't get much bigger. If you write a bigger sentence, it's too big. You've too much. I recommend making it smaller. So those are the four types of sentences you can use. And then we learned about all the rules for commas and punctuation. All right. Well, I hope this was helpful. I hope you have learned something new about writing and how to write these these English sentences and how to connect the clauses together with commas. I really recommend you take these notes the next time you write so that you can have them to help identify what you need to do for the next letter or essay or whatever you write. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great afternoon, and I hope to see you again. Bye bye.